are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everyone to our Kansas and Oklahoma broadcasters joining us today. I'm Allison Mazey, Executive Director of the Kansas Association of Broadcasters. We are here to discuss the February 1 radio license renewal for our states. And here to lead us through that process is David Oxenford. David is a broadcast and digital media law thought leader and influencer representing clients in Washington, D.C. for over 35 years. Welcome, David. Thank you for being here today.
Great. Thank you so much, Allison and Nancy and Vance in Oklahoma. Thank you for assembling the troops from Oklahoma to listen in with those folks from Kansas that Allison has brought to this webinar. Thank you all for joining us here this afternoon. I've brought with me Tracy Bogans, legal assistant extraordinaire, probably the most knowledgeable person about some of the digital filing systems at the FCC, to talk about some of the technical processes that you'll need to go through in filing the license renewal application. So Tracy will be my guest star, and I'll turn it over to her a couple of slides in to talk about some of the, again, the technical issues you need to know about filing that license renewal that's due next February 1st. As we go through the session today, feel free to shoot us some questions. Use the question box that should be in that little control panel there. If you point the cursor down, that little arrow down, you'll get a box. You can type in a question and we should be able to see that, and I'll try to monitor that as we move through it and try to answer your questions as we go along. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be talking about here today. You know, the license renewal process is one that you all may not be familiar with because it's an 8-year license renewal cycle. The last time license renewals were granted for stations in Kansas and Oklahoma was way back in 2013. So if you're new to the station or new to station management in the last 8 years, you may not have been through this license renewal process. You know, even if you're an old hand at it and have been through it for many times in the past, things have changed, and we're going to try to highlight some of the issues here. Obviously, we're not going to be able to cover everything in detail here. This shouldn't substitute for legal advice from your own attorneys, but we're going to try to highlight some of the issues, some of the things you should be thinking about now, some of the things you should be looking at, some of the issues that may come up that you will want to discuss with your own attorneys and advisors in preparing that license renewal process, or in preparing your license renewal application. So this 8-year license renewal cycle has started, actually, the current cycle back in June of 2019. The FCC does a couple of states at a time. In June of 2019, it started with radio stations here in the DC area, Maryland, Virginia, Washington, DC, and West Virginia, and then it moved south and now is winding its way back through the middle of the country. We'll go out to the West Coast and then finish up in 2022 with the New England states and the northern mid-Atlantic states. So we've seen a bunch of license renewals get processed from those early license renewal windows, and have been able to learn some of the things that the FCC has been looking at. So we'll talk about those as we go along here today. Obviously, as Allison said, your license renewal filing deadline for radio stations in Kansas and Oklahoma and in Nebraska, if you happen to have stations just to your north, it's February 1, 2021. TV stations, if we have any TV folks who are listening in on this license renewal, you're a year behind. Most of these issues, if we do have TV stations on the webinar here today, these issues will apply to you as well. There'll be a couple of additional things that you'll need to look at, particularly in the area of children's television programming. Since this is focused more on the radio guys, we won't be talking about that in detail, but keep that in mind for your license renewal. So you need to be ready for filing your license renewal sometime in the next 2 months. And really, you can pretty much get ready to file it at any time before that February 1 deadline. You'll be filing in the LMS database system, not CDBS, which many of you may have been used to filing applications in before. LMS, when we started doing these renewal seminars for stations in the DC area and in the Southeast, was relatively new at that point. At this point, hopefully most of you are familiar with LMS. The last two biennial ownership reports that all of you should have filed have been filed in LMS. FM construction permit applications migrated to the LMS systems, as well as translator applications in 2019. Just last month, LMS started to be used, in November, LMS started to be used for assignment and transfer applications as well. So hopefully by now, many of you or most of you are familiar with the LMS system. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few moments, and Tracy will come up to talk about some of the details and issues that arise when dealing with LMS. Also, we've got some new online public file obligations that are causing many problems that didn't exist in the last license renewal cycle. Since everything's now online, we've got all sorts of people that can meddle in the process, including the FCC folks themselves, who can see what's in your public file. In the past, they used to have to come out to your station to look. Now they can look in your online public inspection file just by turning on their computer, in the first thing in the morning in their pajamas and their fuzzy slippers with a cup of coffee. They go to the dining room table because all those FCC people are working from home, just like many of us here in Washington and probably some of you as well. They just turn on their computer and they can look in your public inspection file. Talk about some of the problems that's created here in just a moment. Also, we'll talk about all of the certifications that are required in the license renewal applications. Much of the license renewal is not providing long, detailed essays or explanations about various things. It's basically certifying whether or not you're in compliance with particular FCC laws or FCC rules. And you can't certify that you're in compliance if in fact you're not, because if you do certify that you're in compliance when you're not in compliance, that's basically lying to the FCC. The worst thing that you can possibly do. You admit a violation, at worst, you're going to get a monetary fine. In most cases, it'll be a slap on the wrist. If you don't admit it and get caught not admitting it, you're liable to get a much larger fine and potentially even lose your license, because lying to the FCC is essentially, for a license, for an FCC license, a capital offense. So you got to be careful with these certifications. And we'll talk about a lot of the other little things that can get you into trouble during the license renewal process. So one word of warning right now before we get into any of these details: don't wait till the last minute to start to get ready. The last license renewal cycle for stations in the Dakotas and Montana and Minnesota ended on December 1. That's on Tuesday. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It happened to be my birthday. I decided to take the afternoon off, go take a walk outside. So I'm walking out in the park near me, and I get a call at about 3 o'clock on December 1st, the deadline for license renewals, from a broadcaster in one of those states saying, hey, I'm having trouble getting into the LMS system, and I don't know that I'm going to be able to get my license renewal on file today. And it's like, what are you doing waiting until the last minute to file your license renewal? Get started now. Start putting information into that license renewal application now, so that if you have any technical problems, you can get the FCC to work with you, or get help from your attorney, or get help from the Kansas and Oklahoma broadcasters hotlines, which is basically me and Tracy. We can help you with some of the more routine sorts of things. You know, this broadcaster who called us on December 1st had been trying for 2 or 3 days to reach people at the FCC, but you know, it's Thanksgiving weekend. People were taking the day off. He reached the help desk, which sometimes it isn't as good as at answering the questions as specific people at the FCC, and he just waited too long. Don't let that be you in preparing your license renewal. So some of the specifics we'll be talking about is why it's important to get your license renewal. It should be obvious, but we'll talk about it. We'll talk about some of the EEO issues that can come up from time to time in the license renewal process. We'll go through the online public inspection file and quarterly issues programs lists, because that's some of the certifications that you'll need to make during the license renewal process. We'll go through the other certifications. We'll talk about some of the specifics as to what you should be planning, who you should be talking to, what information you should be gathering in preparation for the license renewal. And then we'll talk about the specific process, what you do and how that process rolls out. So we'll be following kind of that outline here in the next couple of minutes. So obviously the most important part about the license renewal, or the most important reason for getting a license renewal, is that, hey, the license is vital to your continued operation of your station. If you don't have a license, technically you don't have authority to operate. Now, you know, I should qualify that a little bit. If you filed your license renewal and for whatever reason the FCC hasn't finished processing that license renewal, you still have authority to operate as long as that license renewal is on file and the FCC is actively processing it, unless they tell you, hey, stop operating because they found some really significant problem, which almost never happens. But if you don't file a license renewal, the FCC can revoke your authority. And usually about 60 days after the end of each of these filing windows for a specific number of states, and that's every other month there's a window for a couple of states to file their license renewal. We'll see a public notice that comes out of the FCC that says the following stations haven't filed their license renewals, and if they don't contact us right away and file those license renewals, their authority to operate will end on a given date. And that's 90 days after your license renewal is due to be filed. So it's important to get your license renewal or your authority ends. If you file substantially late, you're going to get a fine from the FCC too. So hopefully everybody who's listening today knows enough not to file late, because you've taken the time to listen to us here today. But call your friends, make sure that all the other broadcast stations that you know in Kansas and Nebraska and Oklahoma, that they're ready to file that license renewal on December 1st or before. Also, it's important to note that the FCC will not permit you to close on a purchase or sale of a radio station while the license renewal is pending. So if you're looking to sell a radio station, you're pretty much too late to do so if you don't already have an application on file, without having to wait at least about 120 days while the FCC processes that license renewal. If you've got one on file, push the FCC to get it done so that you can close it before February 1 and the buyer can file the license renewal application. Otherwise, if you don't get it closed, you're going to have to keep operating it, keep being responsible for that station through the license renewal window and the 4 months that it takes the FCC to process the license renewal. One of the issues that does come up in license renewal is EEO. In fact, there is a separate EEO form, the FCC Form 396, that has to be filed in connection with the license renewal. In fact, even if you've got fewer than 5 full-time employees, every station has to file Form 396 If you've got fewer than 5 full-time employees, you check the box. It says we've got fewer than 5 full-time employees. You answer whether or not there are any lawsuits or other legal actions, complaints before employment regulatory agencies, the Oklahoma Employment Office, the Kansas Employment Office, the EEOC here in Washington, or any other lawsuits raising employment discrimination issues pending. If you've got nothing pending, you're fewer than 5 full-time employees, fill out information about the station, check the box, fewer than 5 full-time employees, and that's it. If you've got 5 or more full-time employees at your station employment unit is all of the stations serving the same geographic area that have at least one common employee. So if you've got a cluster of 3 or 4 stations in the same area and you have a common general manager, a common sales manager, or a common janitor for that matter, you're an employment unit, and that employment unit has 5 or more full-time employees. You've got an obligation to file the Form 396, which attaches 2 annual employment reports that you've done for the last 2 years. The most recent one will be the one that has to be put into your online public inspection file by February 1 of this year, the same date as the renewal. So as soon as you're done in January with the last hire that you may be making in the new year, finish that annual employment report, get it into your online public inspection file, and then file that Form 396, because they will, the FCC form for the renewal does not allow you to file until you've got that Form 396 on file. And then the other annual EEO public inspection file report that will be included with this Form 396 is the one that ended on February 1 of last year. The FCC is looking at those reports to make sure that you've widely disseminated information about all your job openings, that you've listed a diverse group of recruitment sources from which you've received applicants for open job openings at your stations, that you're not just recruiting, not just interviewing people who have come from word of mouth or referrals from your consultants or walk-ins basically to your stations, but you're publishing notices and online recruitment sources, or reaching out to different organizations within your communities or different educational institutions, or using employment recruitment sources outside that old boys network of routine broadcast sources to fill employment openings at your stations. We've had a couple of stations that have gotten inquiries from the FCC just in the last couple of months about FCC folks who in their employment opportunity branch who've looked at the license renewals and had questions about the wide dissemination that had been done, or had questions about some of the numbers that didn't add up. You had employment openings, you talked about what sources you used, but yet didn't list any interviewees from any of those sources. So sometimes those don't make sense. Make sure that those numbers make sense internally in your annual employment reports. And also make sure that there is a link on your homepage of your website for your stations to your annual employment reports, which have been uploaded to the FCC's website, because that's another obligation and another thing that the FCC can look at in reviewing the EEO performance of your stations. You know, other issues in the online public inspection file. And the online public inspection file is, in fact, being reviewed. The FCC is watching that online public inspection file. As I said, they've raised EEO issues, they've raised some political issues and past renewal cycles. They've looked at other issues that come up. They look at quarterly issues programs list to make sure that they're actually there. So, make sure that you've actually got information there. You're also going to have to certify in your license renewal application that everything that was required to be in the public inspection file during this entire license renewal term, in fact, went into that file and was uploaded at the right time. This includes certifications, or actually you have a separate certification about ownership. Did you file your biennial ownership report in both 2018, which actually was the 2017 report, but the FCC didn't get its new forms together in time, so they pushed the filing deadline into early 2018. And then for the 2019 report, that again, the forms got changed slightly, so that filing deadline got pushed into early 2020, but you should have biennial ownership reports on file for all full power stations for both 2017 and for 2019. There'll be lots of issues about political broadcasting. That's been a huge source of problems in the last couple of months at the FCC as the election has raged across the country. The FCC has looked at every broadcast license renewal who has not been able to certify full compliance with their public inspection file obligations because some political orders or political information was not timely uploaded. What the FCC is looking for is that all of your information for your political orders, so when you get an order to buy time from a candidate, federal, state, or local candidate, or from a federal issue advertiser, you're supposed to put all of the information about the order into your online public inspection file, upload it to that FCC hosted online public inspection file within 1 business day of the date that order came in. So if you get an order from Katz to run a Donald Trump ad on October 15th, by October 16th, it should have been in your online public inspection file. They're looking at orders, not the NAB form that discloses who the buyer was. They're not talking about the disclosure information about exactly what time those spots ran that goes into your online public inspection file after the order ran, when you're doing your affidavits of performance or sending out invoices that actually show when those ran. You're supposed to put that information in your public inspection file as well for all these political orders. But the order itself, when you get an order that says, I want to buy spots on a particular number of days, spots of this class for this much money, I'm going to spend this much money, and that's when those spots are going to run. When you get that order, it should go into your public inspection file within 1 business day. And if you haven't been doing that, you're not going to be able to answer the question, yes, that you've uploaded everything in a timely manner. And if you've had more than 5 of these late uploads of orders in the last 2 years, you're likely to get a consent decree from the FCC. These consent decrees require that you provide additional paperwork to the FCC, showing that you've educated your staff so that these problems don't arise again. You've got to do a compliance seminar of some sort. The NAB has provided some. I've done some. I've done some specific ones for clients that have had problems. I'm sure all the other attorneys in Washington have done the same thing. You've got to adopt a written compliance plan that everybody who's involved in the sale of political advertising gets a copy of so that they don't mess up what's supposed to be done with future political orders. And you've got to provide over the next 2-year period, at the end of each year, at the end of next year or the year after, right after election season, to the extent there is an election season, you've got to provide a spreadsheet showing all your political orders and how quickly those orders got into your online public inspection file. And you've got to individually report to the FCC anytime you messed up, so that the FCC can ask for more information or impose additional conditions if they've got problems. So it imposes a lot of paperwork, a lot of monitoring requirements. So if you haven't been doing a particularly good job of your political files, maybe a little too late to fix those, since the election's already over, but it's a good time now to look at those political files, identify problems, start talking to your lawyer about how you can explain what you did or didn't do in your license renewal application. The public file will also host FCC applications, most of which are uploaded by the FCC itself. Quarterly issues programs list is another area of problems. Talk about that in the next slide. You also should have in your online public inspection file either contracts relating to station ownership or in a list of the contracts relating to station ownership by title and date in which they've been entered into, with a brief description, which the public can request, and you have to give to them within 7 days. And that means any document that relates to future ownership, if there are options, stock pledge agreements, any sort of buy-sell agreements that restrict the sale of stock, any sort of loan documents that restrict what you can do with the operation of the station, changing the format, stock pledge agreements that you've entered into in connection with financing, certain lending documents that are very detailed in what you can do and can't do in the operation of your station. Again, worth talking to your lawyer about to make sure that you've got all the proper documents listed. Articles and bylaws for corporations also need to be listed among those station ownership and control documents. Those quarterly issues programs list, actually, I think we have some questions here. Because of COVID, we haven't been able to attend job fairs. Any chance the FCC will allow stations to have some leniency on that? What the FCC is still looking for you to do these non-vacancy specific outreach efforts. We have, in fact, if you look at my blog, broadcastlawblog.com, about a month or two ago, I posted an article there about some of the EEO outreach efforts, the non-vacancy specific outreach efforts that you can do without actually physically being present, without doing these job fairs. Some state associations have been doing virtual job fairs. Some other organizations have been doing virtual job fairs that you can do even without physically going to those places. But also the same credits can be, or similar credits can be obtained by speaking to educational institutions. And you can do that through a Zoom conference about broadcast employment opportunities, speaking to community groups about broadcast employment opportunities is another EEO outreach effort that you can do without being physically present through one of these Zoom meetings. Other things, internship programs. If you work with either the Kansas or Oklahoma Broadcasters Associations to help them with their scholarship programs, reviewing applications, helping them set up the publicity. Just giving them money is not enough. Just giving them spots to promote the program is not enough. But if some of your employees work with those associations in actually managing those scholarship programs, or you set up your own scholarship program, that counts as an EEO outreach effort. You set up training programs for your own employees to advance their skills to the next skill level, a sales secretary to a salesperson to a management position. Set them up for some training. That counts for these EEO credits. mentorship programs for existing employees. Get some of your new employees hooked up to your old employees to have regular meetings to discuss how they can better do their jobs at the stations. Those count for EEO credit. Setting up internships, virtual internships, is something that's been done during the course of this pandemic with educational institutions. You get credit for those sorts of internships. So there are ways to get EEO credit even without being physically present there. Let's see. I saw another question, but I'm not seeing it. Oh, how far in advance of the deadline can you file the am I still there? Tracy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay, but my slides just, are you still seeing the full screen of the slides?
Yeah, well, it went back to the beginning. Okay.
Now you're on the quarterly issues programs list.
Okay, so it is there. That's weird.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened there. I just had a little glitch, I guess, in my internet connection. Okay, so let's, so the other question was how far in advance of the deadline can you file the renewal application? Tracy, is it open for December filings now, or for February filings now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you can file.
So once you know that you're not hiring anybody in January, or if you've got fewer than 5 full-time employees, you can go ahead and do that 396, prepare the license renewal application and file it now. So let's move on to the question about the quarterly issues programs list. These are important documents that can also get stations into trouble. In the last license renewal cycle 8 years ago, this was the area where there was the most fines up to $15,000 per station for a significant number of missing quarterly issues programs lists. In the current license renewal cycle, the FCC has been a little bit more lenient, although there have been 2 fines of $15,000 issued for a couple of stations in Virginia that basically forgot about the requirements to do these quarterly issues programs list and didn't put anything into their online public inspection files. I have the sense that the FCC is beginning to look a little bit more closely at these, and we will have a new FCC administration after the inauguration in January, and a Democratic FCC may well be more attuned to these sorts of issues. They'll be the ones reviewing your license renewal application. So I would be sure that you get all your quarterly issues programs list up into your public inspection file. You're supposed to have quarterly issues programs lists that go into your public inspection file 10 days after the end of each calendar quarter. So on April 10th, July 10th, October 10th, and then on January 10th, you're supposed to have quarterly issues programs lists that describe 5 to 10 issues or a number of issues that are of importance to your community, things like healthcare, things like transportation, things like education, whatever those issues, taxation, real estate and development issues, whatever the issues are of importance to your community. If you're in a community with a big military population, military issues may be an issue. Whatever those issues are in your community, list the issues of importance to your community in the prior quarter and the programs that you broadcast on your station to address those programs. You're supposed to have a quarterly issues programs list in your public inspection file for every quarter going back to your last license renewal grant. So that would be sometime in 2013. You would have quarterly issues programs lists there. So by February 1, you'll have essentially 32 quarterly issues programs list in your online public inspection file. All your old ones should have been uploaded in March of 2018 when we migrated to the online public inspection file. So make sure that those are all there. These quarterly issues programs lists, in addition to listing the issues and listing the programs responsive to each issue, for those programs, you're supposed to provide the date on which each of those programs ran, the time at which those programs ran, the duration of the discussion of the issue that is being addressed, and a brief description of what that discussion was. So if, taxation issues is one of the issues facing your community, and you had an interview with your state senator about a tax bill that was pending in the state legislature during your 6 o'clock news, you would list 6 o'clock news, discussion with Senator Smith about tax bill pending in Oklahoma State Legislature, 2-minute conversation at approximately 6:08 p.m. on October 10th or whatever the date was. That kind of description is what you're supposed to be providing. You should be having several programs to address each issue. PSAs actually do count, or even other short announcements can count as being issue responsive, but they should never be the only programming that addresses a particular issue. They're sort of supplemental, icing on the cake. You should always have some sort of longer program, a news report, a public affairs program, even a discussion of your entertainment disc jockey has during a morning show where he or she talks about the traffic problems out on Highway 1 or the road construction down on Main Street, or whatever the issues are that are facing your community. Those can all be seen as issue responsive programming. So make sure that that you do a thorough job of documenting what you've done to serve the public, because these quarterly issues programs list are the only official record of how you've served the public in your area. And every licensee is responsible for serving the public interest and serving the needs and interests of the communities in which they serve. So make sure that you do thorough quarterly issues programs list. Again, LPFM stations, in case there are any LPFM listeners, you're exempt from these, but all full power stations do need to include that information there. Once a renewal has been granted, can you remove all the quarterly reports from the previous license term? Yes, indeed, you can. So once this license renewal is granted, which should be in sometime in May, if there are no problems, you'll be able to remove all the ones from this quarter and start again on assembling your 32 for the next 8-year license renewal term. There's a bunch of other license renewal certifications that you'll need to be making in the license renewal application. One of them is that you filed all those biennial ownership reports. So go back and make sure that those have been filed and that they're showing up in your online public inspection file. You need to certify that the station is on the air, and hopefully you know whether or not your station is on the air. If it's not, traditionally the FCC will not grant a license renewal. So if you've got a lightning strike that happens between now and license renewal time, get that station back on the air as quick as possible to get the license renewal. Or if you've got an AM station that just hasn't been doing much in the way of business and you're thinking of getting rid of it, you're likely not going to be able to sell it or give it away during the license renewal term if it's off the air. Even if you file an assignment application, it's not going to be granted. So you may want to put it back on the air, get that license renewal, and then deal with getting rid of that station later on. Remember too that all of these online public inspection file documents are, when they're uploaded, are date stamped. If you look at your public inspection file, it's a good thing to do. Go to the FCC's website for the online public inspection file and take a look at your own online public inspection file. You see that there's a documented date as to when the documents have been uploaded. So the FCC can tell whether your ownership reports were timely filed, whether those political documents got into the public file on a timely basis. That's right there for the FCC to review. So you've got to be careful. You also have to certify that there haven't been any fines or other violations found by the FCC at your station. So if you've had a notice of violation because of some transmitter being off frequency, or your tower lights being out, or your fence being down around your transmitter site, or any other problem, you've got to report that in the license renewal. You know, if an alternate inspector that the KAB or OAB had to come inspect your station found some problems, that doesn't need to be reported as long as you fixed it and it never turned into any sort of FCC violation. But if the FCC found an issue, then it's got to be reported in a question on the license renewal. You have to report whether the station has been off the air for any substantial period during the license renewal term, for any period of over 30 days. Again, if you've been off the air for a substantial period, there may be some ramifications. In some cases, the FCC has been granting some short-term renewals to some stations that were off the air for almost a year and then went back on the air for a couple of days and then went off the air for months at a time, because no station can be off the air for more than a year or you lose your license automatically. So be very careful to never do that, but don't even keep it off the air for extended period of time, because the FCC is watching that. Make sure that you're in compliance with all RF radiation issues. Talk about that on the next slide. Make sure there have been no character issues against any of your attributable owners. And a character issue is any sort of felony, any sort of media antitrust related allegations that have been lodged against any business in which they're involved, any sort of discrimination that's again been filed against any business in which they've been involved, any sort of fraud before any other government agency, any place where they've been accused of lying before any government agency. And an attributable owner is any of your shareholders of more than 5%, any of your officers or directors in a partnership, any of your partners in a limited partnership, any of your general partners, or any of your limited partners who don't have the FCC's magic non-attribution language that says they're fully insulated from any decision-making authority, any voting members in an LLC are attributable owners. So if you've got any of those folks that have had any of these legal issues, you've got to report those legal issues, and that can cause issues on your license renewal. You've got to report whether you're in compliance with the alien ownership requirements, that basically your station's not owned by foreign owners, more than 20% of the stock of the licensee or 25% of a parent company of a licensee. Oh, and you also, a new certification that I don't have here, that you're in compliance with the multiple ownership rules. That's probably not going to be an issue in Kansas or Oklahoma. There have been a couple of newspapers, for instance, that bought radio stations while the the broadcast newspaper cross ownership rules were abolished by the FCC in 2017, but reinstated by the Court of Appeals in 2019. If you bought a newspaper, if a newspaper bought a radio station, or a radio station bought a newspaper in that interim period, they're no longer in compliance with the rules and they have to report that. So start planning to get information about all of these issues now. Talk to your station engineer about making sure you're in compliance with all the RF radiation standards. Essentially, if your station is unchanged from the last time the FCC has approved it on any sort of construction permit application or on your last license renewal application, and there haven't been any more antennas or anything hung at your transmitter site by any wireless users or wireless broadband folks or local Wi-Fi systems or anybody, any other radiator put on your tower, you're going to be likely in compliance and can make this certification, but have your engineer check it to make sure that you're in compliance. You're also certifying that you're not allowing access to any areas of high RF radiation. So AM stations in particular often have fenced in areas that are required to be in compliance with the RF radiation standards, because if you to deny access to the base of the tower, which are usually areas of high RF radiation that you don't want to have casual folks strolling by and getting fried as they walk by the transmitter site. If your fence is falling down, you can't make that certification. So make sure that those transmitter site fences are up and operating. Check in with all those officers and directors and the other folks holding attributable interest now to make sure that they don't have any sort of character issues, to make sure that they still own the stock, that they haven't put it into a trust. We've had situations where they've put it into a trust that's all the stock is held and voted by some bank in Canada, which creates alien ownership issues. So just take a look at those sorts of things. Check in with your owners to make sure that there haven't been any issues at any of their other businesses, or and that their ownership is still correct. Now, let's talk about some of the specific issues to make sure that you get all the details right. You need to make sure that you know what your licensee's name is, because you'll need to have that accurate on the license renewal, and you're going to need it to look everything up in the FCC's database. You know, make sure you know whether you're comma Inc. or incorporated written out, or corporation, XYZ Media Corp Inc. Corporation, comma Inc. Incorporated. Make sure that's all right. Make sure that you've got consistent street addresses in your FCC notifications, and Tracy will talk about how you can update that information in just a moment, because if the FCC sends notices, you want to make sure that you get the notices from the FCC. Make sure that you know what your legal call letters are. Some FM stations are WXYZ FM, dash FM. Some are WXYZ parens FM. A dash FM is, that FM is part of your legal call letters. You need to make sure that's right. Make sure you know your city of license too. You may be licensed to a suburban community in Oklahoma City area, or Tulsa area, or the Wichita area, or the Kansas City area. Even though you may be directing your programming to that bigger metropolitan area, the city of license is technically where your primary responsibility is for issue responsive programming. So make sure some mentions of those cities of license show up somewhere in those quarterly issues programs lists. Make sure that if you're describing what you've done in any place in the license renewal and any sort of explanation of your public service or your actions, you mention the city of license. Get these sorts of inconsistencies corrected before you get on file. So Tracy, why don't you talk about some of the FCC identifiers, and I'll take a drink and rest my voice for a couple of minutes and talk about some of the filing system before we get into some additional questions to think about in the license renewal process.
Sure. So as David mentioned, as you're planning and getting ready to get your license renewal on file, you want to make sure that all of your identifiers are correct. And the way that you would do that is, once you are logging into the LMS system, you will need to have your FRN and password, which by now you all should be familiar with what your FRN is and the password, because that's how you do business with the FCC. If there are any inconsistencies in your licensee name, the phone number, or the address, this is where you would make the corrections in the CORS database that's in the FCC system. And you log into CORS with your FRN and password, and it's very user-friendly. You just type in the correct information. You know, if there's a period missing, if the phone number has changed or anything like that, you can make those corrections there. Because once you're ready to file your license renewal, when you log in with your FRN and password, all of the CORS information is what's going to pull in to pre-fill in your license renewal. So the name, the licensee name, your street address, phone number. The only thing that you can correct within the renewal is an email address, or you can correct your phone number actually in the renewal application, but street addresses and things like that are pulled from your FRN. So you want to make sure that that is correct. One of the other big issues that we have found are a lot of call signs are not automatically associated with your FRN. So you want to take care of this issue now. So if you want to log in to the FRN, log into LMS, you should see all of your call signs that are associated with your FRN. If there are any call signs missing, you'll need to have those call signs associated right away. So you can have that done by reaching out to an FCC staff person who can associate those call signs with your FRN. And it's a simple email. His name is Qua Tran, and this is what he does all day long. He associates call signs correctly with FRNs, and his email address is khoa.tran@fcc.gov. khoa.tran@fcc.gov, and he can make that association for you. And I think that's about it.
Thank you very much, Tracy. And somebody here noted accurately that you're the one that does all the work at our law firm. So a friend of yours is watching this webinar.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I saw another question that had come in during this. Oh, when I said obligations to certify as to all these issues, that when I mean certify is the FCC is asking you whether you've done all these things. And at the end, you certify that everything that you've checked, all those boxes that you've checked up above are true. So that's your certification. It's not before a notary. It's by checking the boxes on this license renewal application and then signing the application. Although it's not a physical signature, it's putting one of your officers or directors, one of your officers or your general partners or other people who are legally allowed to certify on behalf of the legal entity in which your license is held. One of those people have to sign this application, so their name is being on the line as saying that all this information is true in the license renewal application. So you got to make sure that they know what's there and that they know that it's all true. So another good thing to do while you're looking at all these issues for license renewal time is making sure that all of your other licenses are accurate. Now, technically, all of your broadcast licenses, including things like STLs, remote pickups, intercity microwaves that are licensed as broadcast auxiliaries, you don't have to list those on this license renewal application. They're all granted automatically with the license renewal application. The FCC's database hasn't quite caught up with that, and there are still some from license renewals that were granted last year that are still showing in the database for these broadcast auxiliaries as not having been granted, but eventually they will be caught up because there's no filing that has to be done for those. It's just automatically taken care of. Translators are a different story. Translators can actually be filed, the renewal for the translator, on the main station page of the license renewal. I'm sorry, on the same form as the main station. There will be a box for listing any translators that are associated with the main station. Fill in that, and that translator can be renewed along with the main station. Boosters are automatically renewed with the main station. Now also check out if you've got any non-broadcast licenses. Some stations have satellite earth stations that may be licensed. Some may have business radios to communicate with remote trucks or other communications facilities that are not broadcast licenses. Those have different license renewal dates. So make sure you're staying on top of those, because we're talking here only about broadcast licenses. It's also a good time while you're looking at all those licenses to make sure that they all cover what you're doing. We run into situations every now and then where somebody goes to sell a station, somebody does some due diligence, they find out that the broadcast auxiliary, the studio transmitter link, is telling the FCC and the rest of the world that the studio is at a location that you moved out of 5 or 6 years ago, that nobody ever bothered to amend the studio transmitter link. So check those things out to make sure that they're all in the right places, that things haven't changed over time, and that they cover all your activities. That if you've got a studio transmitter link and you've never gotten a license for it, get it licensed so that nobody catches you. Because if anybody is ever going to review how you're operating your station, if there's ever a time that they're going to do it, they're going to do it now. So make sure that that's taken care of. Also, make sure all your regulatory fees have been paid, those annual fees, because if you haven't paid your regulatory fees, the FCC is not going to accept the license. The FCC, incidentally, has been sending out a batch of letters over the last couple of weeks to stations saying that they haven't paid their regulatory fees, when in fact they did pay their regulatory fees. There's some transitions in new databases that don't seem to be talking to each other and have been identifying a bunch of unpaid fees that aren't in fact unpaid. If you get one of those letters, make sure that you talk to the FCC or talk to your attorney and get that fixed, because that could create a red light problem that will prevent you from filing your license renewal on time. And in fact, Tracy, that's going to remind me, and I'll ask you to get back on here in just a moment. In filing the renewal, let's talk about the actual process. First of all, you used to have things called pre-filing announcements, where right now you would be telling the world that you're going to be filing a license renewal and to watch out for it and to know that they've got the opportunity to comment on your license renewal. The FCC did away with that requirement. So no more pre-filing announcements to deal with in case you happen to have heard about the obligation for a pre-filing announcement. Then you file that license renewal on or before the February 1 deadline date, making sure that that Form 396 has been filed before the license renewal. There will be a number associated with the filed Form 396 that you actually have to fill in to the license renewal application in order to get that license renewal on file. You electronically upload that information onto the forms in the LMS system, and then get those applications on file. Now, Tracy, fees.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about the fees that have to be paid with these license renewal applications.
So a full power AM FM station, the renewal fee is $200. The renewal fee for FM translators is $70. And you have to, you pay the fee per application. So if you have one main station and it has 3 translators, that'll be on the same application, and it'll list the main station, the call letters, and it'll have $200, and it'll list the translator, then it'll list $70, and it adds it all up for you, so you don't have to do any math. All you have to do is get your credit card out and submit the fee.
And how do you submit the fee?
So you need that FRN and password again. Once you file the application, there'll be a little triangle next to the file number that says fee due. You click that triangle, and it'll take you to the fee filer database, which that, as David already mentioned, that's one of the FCC's newer databases that we had some issues with early on, but I think they fixed all those glitches now. Once you click that button, it's going to take you to Fee Filer, and you enter your FRN and password again. So it's very important that you have that. And it'll show you the renewal that you just filed, and it'll show you the total due for that application. You click on the amount that's due, and it'll populate another screen where you enter your credit card information, your address, and all that pertinent information. And then you certify that what you've entered is correct and you really want to pay this fee. Check that box, and it'll process the credit card payment. The receipt no longer looks like it used to look. There are no more 159 forms. You're just going to get a paragraph that has some FCC generated confirmation numbers. It'll have your name that you used with the FRN, and then it'll have the amount, it'll have the licensee name. It won't say that it was for the renewal. You'll just have to know it's by that amount that you paid. None of that specific information that we're used to seeing, like call signs and B-type codes, all that stuff has gone away. You're just gonna get a little receipt that you need to just keep track of. What I've been doing is writing on, I print them out and write what that fee filing is for, so we can have good records. So that's something that you may want to do as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Tracy. So another question that came in was that I had mentioned traffic reports could count as the issue on the issues programs list as addressing issues of concern to the community. I didn't really mean traffic reports. I meant that if transportation, for instance, is seen as a problem in your community, it doesn't have to be a boring Sunday morning program that addresses the issue of traffic or transportation in your market. It can be a more lighthearted discussion that's done on your morning show. If your morning disc jockey decides to start taking calls about all the traffic bottlenecks in the community and having a discussion about traffic problems in that community that seriously addresses that issue, I think that's issue responsive. So, that's the kind of thing. Just a traffic report probably is not issue responsive. Severe weather reports, that's a little ambiguous. I could see an argument could be made either way. I think that's one you talk to your attorneys about as to whether severe weather and certainly the effects of weather can be an issue of importance to your community. But getting back to the process of filing the license renewal, after you file the license renewal, there's an obligation to do some post-filing announcements. Now, the post-filing announcements, the obligations just changed just a couple of weeks ago. And in the past, you had to do 6 post-filing announcements over the course of a 3-month period. Now you do 6 announcements over the 4 weeks after the acceptance for filing of your application. And an application is accepted for filing usually just a couple of days after you paid the fee in connection with that application. In the 4 weeks following the acceptance for filing, you need to do 6 announcements, at least 1 in each of those 4 weeks, no more than 2 in any 1 week, and no more than 1 on any day. All of these announcements need to run between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. Monday through Friday. The new obligations also require that you add a button on the website homepage that links to FCC applications, where for most FCC applications, you've got to put a text of the public notice. Now, for some strange reason, even though the FCC required this FCC applications tab on every station's homepage, whether or not you've got an application pending, and if you don't have any applications pending, it's supposed to take you to a page that says we have no applications pending. If you do have an application that requires public notice pending, it's supposed to list that public notice. For some reason, the license renewal, which does require a public notice, doesn't require that that public notice be posted on your online public inspection file. Makes no sense to me. But when you have an assignment or transfer pending, the text of that assignment or transfer text will go into your online, into your public inspection file and be connected to this link on your home page. If you do a city of license change application, that would be require a public notice that would have to be posted on this page where there's a link from your homepage of your website. But for renewals, for whatever reason, the renewal, you just do an over-the-air announcement for your full power station. But if you've got a translator, the translator does need to do a written online public inspection file notice that goes in the public inspection file of your main station. So if you've got an AM station that's got an FM translator associated with it, the AM station's public notice doesn't need to go in your public inspection file. I'm sorry, it's not in your public inspection file. It's on your website, but you do need to have the text on your website of the notice, the online notice for the translator. It's incredibly confusing how the FCC did it. They were supposed to simplify it, but I think they made it more complicated. Here's the text of the public notice for the license renewal. On whatever date you filed the application, your licensee name, licensee of the call letters, frequency of the station, 1390 AM, 97.1 FM, whatever, city of license, state in which you're licensed, filed an application with the FCC for renewal of its broadcast license. Members of the public wishing to view this application or to obtain information about how to file comments and petitions on the application can visit publicfiles.fcc.gov and search in KXXX's public inspection file. The translator notice, as I said, will be basically that same wording, except at the end, you'll have a link to the online public inspection file in the FCC where they can actually look at that renewal application. Again, crazy that the translator requires that this written notice be posted in your on your website, but the actual main station does not require the written posting there. Once those notices are run on your station, you've got to do a certification of compliance, saying the dates and times at which those announcements ran, and those go into your public inspection file, your online public inspection file hosted by the FCC as well. And the text for translators, as I see one of the questions, has to be on the web page of the host station, the primary station for the translator. That's correct. And again, you're supposed to have this tab now that says FCC applications right now, right next to the one that says EEO reports, or next to the one that says FCC online public inspection file. All of those should be listed on the home page of your website for each of your stations, with links to your EEO report, with links to the FCC online public inspection file, and then links to this new page on your website that has the public notices for any application that requires a public notice or a statement that says you've got no such application pending. Again, crazy obligation, but that's required. So you get these applications on file. What do? Sit around and wait. The public can file comments for 3 months after you file your license renewal application. So, March 1 will come and go, April 1 will come and go, May 1 will be the deadline for filing objections. If no objections are filed and there aren't any other problems with your license renewal, you'll probably get a grant towards the end of that month, the end of May. If there are problems or you don't get a grant and you don't know why, it's a good time to start calling the FCC or have your attorney call the FCC to ask whether there are problems or why your application didn't get granted by the end of May. So In conclusion, and I'm going to right after this run quickly through the form just so you can see what it looks like. Do your homework. Make sure that you've got all the information about how to answer these questions. You've gone through your public inspection file to make sure that it's accurate and complete. And if it's not, you figured out how you're going to justify the problems that you've had. Make sure that you carefully answer all those questions, that your answers are clear, concise, and very accurate, because if you don't answer accurately, that's worse than admitting to some violation. The FCC can take licenses away to people who aren't honest in making these certifications. If you're late uploading something, or you haven't done something, or you've got problems, admit it to the FCC, fess up. You're likely just going to get a slap on the wrist, but if you don't admit it, you're going to have all sorts of problems. So just taking a quick look at the form. This is going to be what the front page of the form looks like, where you put general information about your applications, whether you're paying fees. Non-commercial stations do not have to pay any fees, which is one of the reasons that you would be checking the box that you're not making fees. You start certifying about the character issues. That's all those legal issues that we talked about. Adverse findings is that the FCC hasn't found somebody in your ownership chain or any of your attributable owners to have any legal problems. FCC violations during the preceding license term. That again is things that the FCC itself found through a inspection or a complaint or in some other way. The alien ownership or control, that making sure that there's no foreign ownership that's impermissible. Non-discriminatory advertising sales agreements. We didn't really talk about this, but your sales documents are supposed to have statements that you don't discriminate in the sale of advertising time. So, make sure that those are there. Nancy is saying that she's getting audio echoing. Hope that's just a unique problem to her, because I don't think I did anything different here. You're going to certify about biennial ownership reports, so that you filed them on time, certify that you've done your EEO program reports. You're supposed to have an EEO annual program report for every year in the license renewal term back to the last one that was granted. Here's that important certification that's getting people into trouble, that the online public inspection file documents have been uploaded to the station's public inspection file as and when required. Basically, you've put everything in your public inspection file when it's due, and everything's there. So make sure that that's done. Adherence to the minimum operating schedule, that you haven't been off the air for long periods of time, that you're not silent, that you haven't been off the air for more than 12 months at any point, because if you were, your license should have been canceled. Environmental effects is that question about RF radiation, essentially. Here's where you put in the information about translators. You'll get to list those translators in a separate section. And then the general certification. This is that certification that I was talking about a few moments ago, that basically says that everything that you've said in all these other certifications is completely true and correct. The authorized party, an officer of your corporation, some other person who's legally authorized to sign on behalf of the licensee entity, their name needs to be there. Here's that form, FCC Form 396, that will need to be filed for anybody, for all stations, where you again list the license, list a contact representative, list the complaints that may be pending for any discrimination matter, including discrimination on the basis of age or any other discrimination, even though the FCC does not usually get into age discrimination. If it's discrimination, disclose it, and then whether or not you've got 5 or more full-time employees. If you don't, that's where the report ends, other than the certification at the bottom. If you do, then you attach the 2 annual public inspection file reports. A couple of resources to look at. My blog is one. Here's my commercial message, right? Check out the Broadcast Law blog, where we're regularly writing about new legal developments for broadcasters, including stuff that comes up during the license renewal cycle and changes in the license renewal process, like some of these changes in the public notice requirements and some of the problems that have come up in the public files. The FCC website also has some good information about license renewal, and that's where you can find that information. These slides I will send out to both Allison and Nancy to distribute to folks who want them, and there will be a recording of this session available afterwards. I'm the hotline attorney for both the KAB and the OAB, so if you've got easy questions that I can answer in one call without any substantial research and without causing any conflict problems or getting into any conflicts with any of your fellow members, happy to answer those questions. Sending me an email is often the easiest way to get in touch with me. I see there's another question about issues, programs lists, and public inspection file obligations for prior licensees. If you bought the station in an assignment of license where your company bought it from some other company that's not associated with you, you're not responsible for the problems that may have existed prior to your ownership of the station, just the stuff since you've owned the station. So if there are no other questions, anybody else have any questions here? Programs issues, on a late upload, how do you notify the FCC? That's just going to be, if you've got a problem with something not having been uploaded on time, you check the box no, that you can't certify that everything was uploaded on time, and attach an exhibit that explains what happened and whether there was any problems with those. And someone noted that it's not an actual tab, but a link on the station's homepage. Yeah, I said tab, but any link on your station's homepage of your website that links to this extra station page where public notices are put up. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a tab. It can just be an active link that leads to that page. And someone said that they've set up a separate page, a public notice link for each of the translators on your website. If it's on the website of the main station and it takes you to the links for the translators, I suppose that's okay too. I think the reason that the FCC may have decided to put the translator links on the main station's page is just because somebody may not hear this is K248BZ and know that, but they do know that your call signs are KXYZ. And that's what they're hearing on that translator. So they may come directly to your station and look for it and not know that they're looking at the translator. But I don't think the FCC would have a problem if you've actually set up a link on the home page directly to the public notices for the translators. And the text has to be on a web page of the host station. That's correct, with a link on the home page of that website. No. Someone asks about post-filing announcements have been eliminated. No. Post-filing announcements, those are the ones that you've got to do in the 4 weeks after filing. 6 announcements in the 4 weeks, at least one each week, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. No more than 2 in any week, no more than 1 on any day in those 4 weeks. And I think that has answered the questions. So hopefully I got all your questions. If not, send me an email, and good luck on your license renewal. Tracy, thanks for helping out. Allison, Nancy, Vance, thanks for setting up this renewal webinar. Good luck, everybody.